Tēnā koutou katoa, nā mihi nui ki a koutou. Hei whangaroa e no ho ana aho. No Brazil aho, ko Rodrigo hiu tōku engua. I'll pass it to Mato Tom for the intros. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, Marcus, Lisa, koutou katoa. If I might just share this little karakia first, and it goes like this. Ka kāriki pō hoi tere ko te ate pū wai hoi kone. Ko te ate kauru wai hoi kona. E ai hoki rā ko te umua te tuhiki haetai ki ngā pukenga, ki ngā wānanga, ki ngā tauira. Patua kuru, patua whao, patua te toki atai haruripuki a kenei au te whare. Huka nui o Tangaroa, I hua ki ia I nukutai maru. Nukutai maru pērā hoki rā ko au ko hine tua huanga e ki miana, e hahanga nei te whānau wa rātā. Rātā I mate atu ki piku piku I whiti. Mate, maranga mai. Mate, maranga mai. Ko whiti nuku te tauranga whānau ara mai te toki. Haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Nō re rewe hana I te atua, e whakahono re te ana. Te riki nui kuini ngā wai honi I te pō. Tae anō tia ngā mana ngā wehi ngahi, ngā tapu katoa, whirinoa. E nā koutou. Rā koutou e pikau nai o koutou mate, ngā mate maho o te wā. Haere, tātou te hungaore kia tātou. Tēnā koutou. The karakia that I shared is the karakia that our pre-European ancestors used in identifying a tree that is matured. And how they identified that tree is that they listened carefully to the bird life. And when the kākāriki or the pōhoi tere picked at the tree, there would be this sound. It might be a thok, 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 which meant that the tree was mature and so ready to be chopped down to form a waka, to build a house, or for whatever reason the people wanted to use that timber for. If it went tick, 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 then it wasn't ready. So the tree was left there. Shortly, we'll explore more of that tree as we go through our slides. But readiness. Ensuring that there's a balance in the readiness and how we navigate those complexities from ancient times to now and into the future. Tēnā koutou, kia ora Rodrigo.
Kia ora mātua. I'm going to start our presentation, Ūkaipō, a networked Indigenous approach to research, place, and photographic representation. Mato, I'm going to go to the next slide, the image of Mangaroa, and you could please tell us the story about this image as an image that it's a significant place, and Mato Tom will talk a little bit more about it now as the beginning.
So this is an image of a mountain on the island of Taha in the Tahitian group of islands, which we visited the end of last year. This mountain is named Maungaroa, and our Tainui stories tell of a child being born with no lower limbs and clearly disabled, however, with a certain magic. So the child was buried on this mountain, and over that burial site grew a tree, as I've just alluded to. And when that tree proved to be mature enough from the animals, the fauna of that region, our tūpuna felled the tree and built our waka tainui from that tree, as the baby's name was Tainuki. That image, being a little less certain of foot at my age, I didn't dare try to scale that mountain, but this image sticks in the mind as indicative of the narratives that our elders brought with them from that space into Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you, Rodrigo.
Thank you, Matua. So in a way, this image for us in the context of our research work, exploring the notions of Ūkaipō, which we'll talk about it shortly, it's an important image because it connects a place of origin in Tahiti with Aotearoa, New Zealand. Just for a little quick intro and context, I'm a visual artist and I have a background in creative practice research and photography. Matua Tom and I, we have keen and shared interests in the decolonizing of the photographic lens, storytelling, and place-based Mātauranga Māori, and how photography intersect with these forms of knowledge. So we go back about 10 years ago when we started our research work in relationship as researchers and as friends now. So this relationship that goes back about 10 years has helped us form a very grounded connection to explore complexities around the decolonizing of the photographic lens. So this project is a research work that we've been doing for about a year now, Ūkaipō. We actually had a little prelude about a year ago at the TPM annual hui. We introduced one of our systems or methodology of Wānanga in photography. I don't know if any of you were here about a year ago at the University of Waikato. So now we're well into the research work. As Matua mentioned, we went to Tahiti last year in November. And so the idea is to work and explore Ūkaipō as a layered and complex Indigenous concept and how that intersects with photography. So I'm going to go for the next slide. I'll keep going, Matua, but if you want to jump in, please signal. So our research work is based on relationships, starting with our very own relationship as researchers and friends. And we use this whakatauki to kind of illustrate how research collaborators and ourselves, we are in the waka paddling together. So, and perhaps Matua Tom is our captain in this way, but we are paddling together with collaborators, okay, in this waka. And the waka, our research waka is built on these relationships that we established with mana whenua here in Aotearoa, or that we established last year with mana whenua in Tahiti. Some of these relationships, they actually, the fabric of these relationships, they actually extend into friendships, and we ended up becoming friends and building more intimate connections that way. But through that, we established this knowledge sharing space that I'm going to talk about it shortly through Wānanga. And then that kind of serves as a really solid foundation for visual storytelling and then the practice of photography that I'm also going to talk it shortly as pathways for knowledge construction. So this photograph is in Kafia, and the Kafia Harbor, this waka, I can't recall the name. Mato, do you know the name of this waka by any chance?
Haunui. Haunui.
Harurui, yes. And
Haunui.
it's one of the traditional voyaging wakas, and it has been a revival of traditional voyaging in the last 30 years, perhaps since the 70s. So it's not new, and it's in its peak at the moment. And we're lucky to have a colleague at Waikato University, Associate Professor Haki Tuaupiki, that also helped us as a collaborator in this project. So the voyaging layer of Ūkaipō, it is part of this complex system, conceptual system. So it's one touch point, and we're going to touch on other touch points here. So voyaging, and the voyaging from Tahiti to Aotearoa, it's one form of Ūkaipō. So we obviously recognize Indigenous knowledge as a layered network of meaningful, complex systems of thought. And you'll see how this kind of plays out in the photographs shortly, and how this plays out in the way that we work with collaborators through Wānanga, and in the creative process, and also as in the final output, which we usually aim for an exhibition of the photographs, where we invite mana whenua, local communities, to attend the exhibition. So generally our projects they have creative components such as exhibition or publication, photo books, and we also do the journal articles. We actually published one last year, and conferences, obviously. Mato, anything you want to add on this slide?
Whakapapa. Whakapapa. In our mātauranga Māori, those layered networks of whakapapa, reinforcing relationships, not only with people, but also with the environment. So that in our whakapapa, we assert a descent and a relationship with our environment and the animals, the fauna, the flora, in that layered network and that complex systematizing of Māori thought show that we are the juniors in the relationship, and we should, and I do enjoy that little term from Marcus earlier, how privileged we are, and that the, as I note, ability of systems to meet the needs in that complex and very layered network, reinforcing relationships. Thank you, Rodrigo.
Thank you. We're moving along to the next slide. So here, before we actually get into the photography and Wānanga methodology, I just want to point out the relationship between Māori and the language of photography. So photography was invented in the mid-1800s, and quickly Britain noticed its powers, and it was quickly to adopt photography as one of their weapons. And in the 1860s, we already had photographers here in Aotearoa, particularly documenting the British invasion of the Waikato region. And that kind of model of photography, coming from a more scientific paradigm, was, as I said, adopted into the colonial project and quickly embedded with imperial aspirations, ideas of control, discursive control ideological control and documentation, land surveying, to show perhaps the rest of the world how at the time Britain was advancing or conquering or calling this place my place. So from that point, Maori had a bit of a friend-enemy relationship with photography. Later photographers photographed rangatira, chiefs that we've seen images of King Tafiao and other chiefs. They're common now, but they are treated as taonga for Maori. And by the mid-19th century, Maori whānau already valued and used photographs in a variety of ways. So photographs in that period now, pushing into time, they were considered taonga or memory containers or family markers and generators of social connection for Maori. So it's common to see inside the Whanganui photographs of tupuna ancestors or in people's houses or in family albums like we have here. And now, up to our present moment, it's fluidly used and incorporated by Maori in tikanga, in various other processes as well. And people, when we were doing our Wānanga sessions, they were very agile and fluent in this language to eloquently talk about their Ūkaipō photographs that they were bringing in for discussion, showing them on phones or prints. And they had a variety of different styles of photography. So for me as a photographic researcher and photographer, it was fascinating and humbling to see how fluent mana whenua and Māori are in this visual language. And not just photography, but other forms of visual language as well. When we saw yesterday those really cool graphics one of the presenters had at the end. So it's a fluid, inherited language. Thank you, Mato. I'm going to go and advance into our Ūkaipō slide. Do you want to touch on anything here?
I believe that the audience is educated enough and skilled enough to be able to read that yourselves. If I might just say, this is a working description rather than a definition. And when we started this, we had our own ideas of what Ūkaipō was, and mostly it had to do with place and origins. When whānau and Wānanga participants joined us, they brought mostly photos of people. So we have to change our understanding through the Wānanga process of how we describe Ūkaipō. This is our present understanding, but it's just a small part of the complexities that people have when they use this expression of Ūkaipō. Thank you, Rodrigo.
Thank you. So this image here, it's an image of Ūkaipō. This is the site where the Tainui Waka is buried here inside this area. This is in Kawhia at Maketu Marae. So obviously with the photography process, we had a number of checkpoints to go through, including marae trustees and permissions to photograph. We were accompanied by mana whenua here. The only kind of input I had was from our discussions with Matatom, was to let's photograph places at dawn, because there is this idea of the beginning of place, the first light in the morning, or even before that, the dawn. So that's how this image was created. And part of the complexity of Ūkaipō, we also throwing in the mix the ori, which I'll pass it to Matatini to talk about, the ori and how that connects with the notion of Ūkaipō.
So, ori is most often interpreted as lullaby, but it wasn't so much to put the child to sleep, but to settle the child and to teach them their whakapapa, their relationships with significant landmarks, with the stories associated with those significant landmarks, but also with their ancestral connections, so that the lullaby would encourage the child in that place bonding and in that earthing of the child with both the land and the people of that land. So this is one part of the ori for my grandson, which I wrote. And there we see the encouragement for him to dive into the echo of the waters his ancestors swam. There to the unity of people under the mantle of the Māori King movement. Hold fast the sweep of the cormorant. The poetry there and the imagery as we sing this to the child, we also tell the story of the swoop of the cormorant, of the Māori King movement, and of the relationship our mokopuna has with those. Kia ora, Rodrigo.
Kia ora, Matua. So the ori, we're going to record this. It's almost finished. Matatini wrote a new ori for his grandson, and we will record that. And the idea is to play that on the background of the photography exhibition. So my background in kind of art or exhibition is an installation. So we tend to combine text, images. This time we're going to have waiata or audio, or the ori into an installation and video as well. So that's how we're planning to incorporate the ori into the project. Also, the lyrics or the wording, it is informing the photographic process. So there are places that are mentioned there that we are seeking or already photographed. So we advancing into our Wānanga and photography methodology. So drawing on Linda Tuhawai-Smith and her ideas on Wānanga as thought spaces, we posit Wānanga as the sharing of thought spaces. And beyond that, we assert the dynamic of a spiraling Wānanga. Wānanga that is in a shared thought space, but also that spirals in and out, over and under and through our work. So this plays out not only at the Wānanga sessions that we have at Marae, and we had 3 Marae Wānanga up to this point, but we also consider Wānanga the engagements or exchanges we have with mana whenua out in their places, or exchanges we have with the environment when I'm photographing. What is that tree telling me or offering me? So then with that kind of collaboration, an image is formed. So the idea of moving away from extraction or documentation that was very kind of intrinsic to the Colonial Project, for instance, or even to conventional landscape photography, where we're fascinated by the beauty and the picturesque. So Wānanga plays out in many different ways. As I said, in marae settings, when we're out in the field, when I'm photographing with mana whenua, in informal exchanges and formal exchanges. This is Toma. We met Toma in Tahiti in the, what was the name of the region where we stayed with Vince? Tautira. Tautira is a very important historical place in Tahiti. It's just south of Papaete. And there are many of those historical places there, and Toma was showing us around and showing and explaining and talking about the storytelling that is connected to this ancient drawings, which again is a form of Ūkaipō. So there's a few images of our marae Wānanga, where people bring their photographs, they talk about it, they share insights. As we sort of touched on it a little earlier, they ended up bringing a lot of photos of their tupuna, in where we actually thought about, well, they're going to bring a lot of photos of places, but they ended up bringing a lot of photos of their ancestors and talking about whakapapa and so on. So it was really interesting for us. And this is kind of how we structure the Wānanga. So we started from a collective sharing space where collaborators share their images, their thoughts. We video record that, and then we move into printing the photographs, putting them on the walls, and people can do the post-it notes, comments, and then there's another circle of sharing of insights. So those are a few more of the images that collaborators brought during our Wānanga session. So as I said, there was a lot of tupuna images, and we did have permission to share. I understand that we don't usually share images of tupuna, but we had permission from collaborators to share these images. This is a video. I'm gonna let now Roimata Morrison share some of her insights onto Ūkaipō.
Me, when I hear the word Ūkaipō, it is like a history of people, land, river, maunga, that the history connects us to a significant place, that either we feel like we are, like Auntie said, for me, 21 St. Crescent, because of the history there and the nurturing that happened there, and but like to a succession, a legacy, a succession.
Kia ora, Roimata. So how this plays into the photography part of this project, how now we can probably realize the complexity of the concept, the layers that it has, and how that influences and informs the photography practice. So as Matatom said, I think you can all read this. I just want to pinpoint what Barry Barclay said about mana tuturu, and this idea of reciprocal relationship between, well, Barry Barclay was a filmmaker, but in my case, the photographer and the photographed, and this collective responsibility that we share, including ownership and copyright of the images. And from my colleague, Natalie Robinson, this idea of the whakapapa lens, we kind of translates really well what we're trying to achieve here through photography, creating genealogical connections and at times even photographing the invisible. So we're getting to the images now, and I'm going to fast track through them. That's not a good term, actually, fast track. I apologize. I will speed through these photographs. We have 1 minute here, I've been told, Matua. But we can have less question time. Oh, it's already question time. Apologies. So we've started from that image, that idea of place, and the whenua ritual, where mana whenua buried their placenta. That was an initial kind of point for us a year ago, and in terms of Ūkaipō, thinking that, okay, a Maori person's Ūkaipō is where they buried their placenta, where they have their placenta buried. Okay, anything you want to add here, Matt?
I realise that we also
Yeah.
have an issue of time.
Yes, and then on the other end, the Urupa, where Tupuna is buried in this case, or Maunga, as Roimata pointed, or Awa River. So this image is where the Waipa meets with Te Piko stream just outside of Pirongia. And then geological connections through a collaboration with a friend and geologist, Oliver McLeod. We have been informed that there are intrinsic geological connections between Karioi and Pirongia Mountain, the rocks that are there, which are called Ankaramite, with the rocks that are present in Raiatea and Taha, which are very similar in composition. So that asserts, again, another form of Ūkaipō or connection and another layer to our project and research work. Nurturing, or kai, Ūkaipō, the birth of life in the stars. Thank you so much. I apologize for the late finish.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Thank you so much, Matua Tom and Rodrigo. That was an incredible presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. Even though we've gone over time, does anyone have a very quick burning question that they would like to ask Matua Tom and Rodrigo?
Mō reina, Matua Tom, Pasha Aho. I noted that when you began with the karakia, you made the comment that this was pre-colonial. So I'm just interested, how important do you think it is to recognise pre-colonial cosmologies and acknowledge them?
Is that a question to me, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay. Hugely important. This concept of Ūkaipō is about beginnings and the past. Surely an understanding of that leads us to an understanding of how we got to be what we are today. And in that understanding, that pre-colonial space can give us, perhaps, I think anyway, guidelines into our future. So that as part of this Ūkaipō and the use of ori, lullabies, the reciting of these narratives, and recognizing that there's a complexity in all of this that requires a navigation. And in navigating that from pre-colonial times through to now and into the future, through this kind of activity, I believe that the Wānanga serves in both the researcher coming to some understandings with those who are ostensibly being researched, and that the mana of all involved are recognised, acknowledged, and respected.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matua Tom.